What's going on, everybody? It's FREEDO and Eddy here to discuss the massive Lucio changes that are going on to the PTR. I think it's hard to tell the big ripple effect and ramifications that this is going to have on the game, and there's so many different things to discuss based upon the different types of team comps that will and won't be good, the different play styles between the pros and the matchmaking side of things. So many things to discuss. So first and foremost, let's break down our initial standpoint of what we felt about Lucio now, and then branch off to Blizzard's decisions on where they want to take him. I think me and Eddy both would agree that we do fall in the camp that believes that Lucio is a must pick, because when played right, he was able to shape team fights in a way that almost guaranteed that you'd win them. Oftentimes people say things like, well, what does speed do? It just makes people move faster? What does that mean? I think they don't realize what that actually means is oftentimes you have an extra player in the fight sometimes. You can effectively be doing more damage. And not only that, you can be avoiding damage when the enemy team's trying to aggress onto you. So it effectively makes your entire team amazing. But that aspect of his kit is getting severely reined in so that he can do a lot of other cool things that Lucio players enjoy to do. And I want to say before we move on that I actually think there's incredible amounts of merit to that strategy, because every hero should feel like a hero to play. So I think that's a step in the right direction, but what does that mean for the game overall? Because Lucio was so integral to how we understand it at a high level of play.
Absolutely, I agree with you, FREEDO. I am of the persuasion that I thought Lucio was fine where he is, and really that attitude comes from looking specifically at how the game plays at the high level. Now, I understand that there's a lot of people watching that don't think that the higher level is the be-all and end-all, and that's absolutely fine. But there's a deeper detail specifically to talk about how Lucio functions currently in the game, and that really ties into how the maps are designed. That's something that people might not think about straight away, but actually when you consider the maps in Overwatch, a lot of them have quite severe choke points. A lot of them have detailing in the map design that require speed at certain points. And although Lucio might feel better individually, you as the Lucio player, I'm sure, will have a better user experience with this new Lucio. Parts of this discussion are going to frame about how the game will function with the Lucio change, because actually I don't think people have grasped just how deep and fundamental Lucio's kit was to how the game actually played.
Or at least could be played, right? Because matchmaking sort of has had an evolutionary process, I feel, where more and more players are being acclimated to what team play looks like in Overwatch, and over time you see the strengths of understanding of where the synergies are, where the coordinated pushes should happen. When all that's getting learned, Lucio starts to be maximized. Now, in matchmaking, he's not there yet, and I think that's where a lot of the players feel like he's not that impactful. But you can't have a non-impactful hero with a near 100% pick rate at the pro level. Those two ideas can't be reconciled at the same time. That it just isn't the case. But what's important to note is that no amount of cool booping ability or wall riding speed or anything other things that they changed can actually amount to the 30 meters of speed boost that he used to have. So as I was explaining before what it does, that value that you could get, which albeit might be difficult to coordinate with random teammates in matchmaking, was a lot more powerful. But I think to some degree, there's one path I want to go down that this is good for the game, but also another path that I think Eddy's alluding to that it's possibly worse for the game, because there's so many engagements that almost, to me, feel unplayable without speed boost, because you'll get to a section and you have to use speed there anyway, and then when the fight breaks out, Lucio is going to need a much bigger skill set in order to function the way he used to. Like, you're going to have to be a much better Lucio player to get a lot less of the value that you used to get out of him, because you're going to need to be able to probably use wall riding just to get a big burst of speed, to jump in, to get close enough to the heroes that you want to heal in speed in order to give them that value. A few things that I don't think will change is that, especially in a death ball or a dive comp, when you're setting up to initiate, you can still functionally see that all your characters could be within that 10-meter radius. And then you break, as in the fight engages and everyone splits up and goes to do their thing. The divers are diving, or the death ball is pursuing, whatever the case may be. But then it starts to get hairy, right? So I almost wonder if at the top level of play, his pick rate doesn't even change that much because he's so integral to setting up those engagements, but the skill set required to do that is going to be so much higher. So it's really in a weird place.
One thing that I want to draw attention to is that we both believe that he'll be more difficult to play as a hero. You've said that before earlier in this comment, and I agree with that. I think he's going to be much more difficult for the individual to get the most out of. Having said that, there are a few things that about his buffs that kind of shift everything around. Let's forget speed for the moment and let's look at his healing. That's the thing I want to talk about right now in terms of how difficult it is going to be for the Lucio player. So because his auras are so much smaller, he will effectively have to pocket certain things because he has to be within range of them. That means you as the Lucio will have to dive, duck, dip and dodge and get where you need to be to support the heroes that you need to be healing. Now, one byproduct of his auras being actually more powerful is that it does bring back playstyles, which I'm sure a lot of the community was sort of glad to be gone. I definitely think that these auras make triple tank somewhat return. Not as powerful as it was before, but still it's going to be pretty good because that is a playstyle that requires that more tight-knit organization. But I don't think that people's perception of him just being better is necessarily true in terms of the individual. He's definitely better in battle. Obviously, his gun is significantly improved. I'm sure mechanically it's going to feel a lot more satisfying. You're going to feel more impactful. However, I think to get that impact is actually just going to be straight up harder.
And there's another avenue to go down that I wonder if people have considered even. Now, on paper, you might say, well, at the top end of play, it's wrong for one hero to have such a ubiquitous pick rate. And I've always been against this whole pick rate argument at all levels of play, just about for every hero, because I think it's much more important to look at the value that a hero brings to the game and the changes and the impact and the fairness of that hero in the state of play, not merely is he picked more often than other heroes, because what you can do is get to a world where, yes, you put Lucio in a spot where other healer combinations are more interchangeable, but we might end up with a less fun experience just for the sake of getting more selection parity, which I think is a mistake and quite short-sighted, actually. So, though part of me still thinks that speed is still going to be very crucial to the top level of play, I think in some ways it has the inverse effect on matchmaking that it thinks it has. So, when I pop on Lucio, and I have my most hours played on Lucio right now, not necessarily by choice, but because I know how powerful he is and how well it can structure the entire team. If you play Lucio with the intention to try to shot call just a little bit for your team and get them to coordinate around your massive speed boost impact, it can be game changing. But now, because the radius of that is so much smaller, imagine trying to get your teammates in matchmaking to huddle around you. It can be so hard to get people to do anything that you'd want them to do. It's hard to get them to go forward when you all want to at the same time, much less get in this small little huddled ball so that they get the effect of your speed boost. So it might not even do what I think they're trying to make it do, because pros will still be able to do that. They were balling up together anyway a lot of the time. Now, granted, when they split apart in a fight, yeah, Lucio won't be giving them that aura, but really, AMP only lasts for a few seconds on a 12-second cooldown anyway. So pro-level Lucios are going to be able to get into the spot to do their amps when they need it at the right time already, but it's just going to make that matchmaking playstyle harder to execute, I think, to the point where now he's more fun to play, but the thing that he was good at, and he's still best at, isn't going to be highlighted as much because players want to go for the wall riding boot plays. Now, the thing about wall riding is, when you're on the wall, you're even less effective as a team support than you used to be. Because your aura is so small, now it's impossible, basically, for you to be riding on a wall and giving any aura to anybody, because you got to imagine as well, when you're on a wall, half of that aura is gone, so you're only dealing with half of the circle to begin with, and in what wall can you envision a teammate being basically right next to you while you wall ride? It just doesn't really happen, right? So really, this Lucio change, I think a big section of it is hinging on this alternate fire boot play, because I think that actually is insane. The ability for him to knock Reinhardt's up into the air is incredibly good, but do we really want Lucio to be put into a place where you have to make these incredibly skillful plays to get the value out of it? Because He simply just requires more skill in that context and is less of a team support.
There's a really interesting thought that I had while you were making those really good points. And that is that I think we'll see a pick increase in matchmaking from the Lucio changes. I don't think that is beyond doubt, really. I think more people will pick him now. And one thing that might happen, because he's not actually suitable after these changes to a wide range of playstyles, is that he's picked more, but the way people play is narrowed down. So those other styles or ways of playing, specifically split DPS, we'll see less often, and we'll see more of a generic matchmaking playstyle that occurs because he's now picked more, which, as you said, is the inverse of what Blizzard were necessarily intending. They wanted to make the game more diverse in terms of pick rate, but actually what will happen is that he'll be picked more, but the style of plays will become much more narrow.
I feel for Blizzard because it's really an impossible decision to make, and I think the way they're going has merit, but at the same time, because it's an impossible two-ended problem where you have a group of people that don't want to play the best hero in the game, and then you have another group of people that know how amazing he is at the other end of the spectrum, and then feel like he always should be played, but then you have really skilled players that don't want to get stuck with Lucio duty. They know he's really good, but oftentimes he won't get picked in matchmaking just because a player wants to have more fun, more so than just simply play the best thing and win. There's so many different problems happening at the same time. So there's not like a clear solution to always solve it. I think where we weigh in on, at least, is that over time, with the current Lucio, more players would realize and respect the massive impact that he does have and begin to generate more enthusiasm over playing one of the best heroes in the game that way. But even more importantly, I think we just needed another support that could compete for this speed demon playstyle that affects a massive amount of the team. Because first of all, this whole aura thing, to begin with, there's nothing else in the game that applies to everyone. Like, the closest analogous ability that I can think of is like a Rhine shield can protect a massive range. It's really big, lots of people get behind it, it can affect a lot of your team at one time. There's very few things in the game that affect so much all at once because 30 meters is so big, right? But at the same time, if you were to just nerf it straight up without giving all these other goofy buffs, then he would almost be not good enough. Now, one interesting buff that Eddy said to us before we started recording was that maybe what we could do is see some sort of compromise with this area of effect of his amp and have it so that when he amped it up, the radius could increase, because right now it's only 10 meters, and in order to try to make that fair, they're giving him all this other power in his battling ability, as well as amping his heals, which, by the way, I don't know if I'm incredibly excited anytime I hear that healing's going to get better in the game. I liked where healing was right now. I don't want to see Roadhog surviving through everything again. I was glad that that arrow was sort of going on its way out, but regardless of that, I would rather see him be more flexible with that aura, and that's where his value is, because that's the most intense impact that he can have on the game, actually, even if it's more fun to be wall riding and booping things.
Yeah, it made a lot of sense to me, that idea that if you want to keep his speed aura as powerful, when you amp it up, it blooms the radius out to 30 meters, but it only lasts for a short period of time. That way it's still kind of balanced, so after the amp has faded, it's, shrinking back down to 10 meters. So that would still fulfill his role of, like, for the pro level, where he would be in the right place at the right time and still affect his team for the duration of that amp. Like, that's functionally what he's there to do. But then in the rest of the game, he's sort of got this like mid game where he's got better heals and he's better in battle, and that would actually just be a straight buff, I think. The only problem with that is, we were talking about it, is if that applied to his heal aura as well, it would be a 30 meter 54 HP per second heal. Now, I think that's a little bit too much, actually. What do you think, FREEDO?
Yeah, definitely. I think some playing around with that. I don't know if I would even want it to be 30, maybe 15 to 20, or maybe the healing amp doesn't spread out. But I'm really concerned, basically, with trying to coordinate with teammates to get them into the best ability in the game. So that's my biggest issue with it, that we're forcing Lucio into playing this razzle-dazzle playstyle when the thing he was actually good at is just going to be so much harder to do, and the effect that that's going to have on the game might not be as good as you think it will be, because I think there's a massive fun element to everyone else on the battlefield when speed amp is in the game often. There's this like intensity that the game gets played at. A while back, when the game first went live, pros even were concerned about how good Lucio was and suggested that all the heroes in the game just got a speed increase in their base kit and Lucio somehow got reworked. But obviously, I think that's a far-fetched, incredibly top-down way of balancing it, because really that just makes every character harder to hit. That's never going to happen. But speed is just so sick, guys. Speed is really, really good.
I think the problem lies in people's perception of Lucio. And Blizzard look at the data that they have and see this massive pick rate at the top level, and they think maybe correctly that's a bit of an issue. But the problem for me is that there are parts of maps and game modes that do feel unplayable without him. I'm sure there's many of you out there who have tried playing King of the Hill without a Lucio on your team and the other team do, and your team just gets rolled. And not a lot of people know why necessarily, and I think that's part of the problem. But that doesn't change the fact that he is so central to how a lot of the game functions that any change to that is kind of worrying to me. I do have to say I am a little concerned. Now, I do think on a personal level he will feel more rewarding to play, but I actually think that's pulling the wool over our eyes to a certain extent.
Another example that came to mind, trying to take Anubis B, for instance. The enemy team is all set up on the point itself, and you have this little bridge and these other different choke points to try to navigate. Without speed boost, closing the distance on that fight can take forever. I mean, any type of spam, Bastion Junkrat, even Soldier, whatever, that the enemy team is getting into you, one of the biggest things that I try to teach players when they ask me about how to like take a point like this is quick, decisive engagements. Like, as soon as you're getting contact, you have to just get in on the enemy team quickly before you allow them time to be riddling damage into you, because the longer that engagement lasts, where you're simply just poking like that, the more chance that they have to pick somebody off, on top of the fact that you're dealing with the most intense respawn that the enemy could have. So not only do you need to get a kill quick, you need to be in on the fight quick, snowballing it immediately, and if you don't do any of that, the game feels horrible to play. That's why they're changing 2CP, luckily, so that you can be rewarded for at least getting some progress on the point, but making Lucio harder to play in that way is going to make those types of engagements even harder to do, because you have teammates oftentimes that aren't taking advantage of that speed in those engagements, and maybe you're like splitting off too much, and you'll have maybe 2 or 3 of your teammates speeding in, and they all can get together, but the characters like Genji or Pharah or whomever are going to be so much slower on the outside fringe flank routes of that they'll be getting to the fight later, and it will make the fights feel more mismatched in how they time and get there. And it would be just harder to execute. But the thing is, like, even with 30 meters of speed, I already find it hard to execute with Masters and Grandmasters players. So I can't imagine how it feels at every other rank of play. So you're making that one crucial aspect that I think defines the way team engagements work in Overwatch harder to do, so that he can have more fun doing other things. That's the real goofy situation that we're in right now, and it's difficult to weigh in entirely one way or the other, because you have two incredibly varying perspectives on the game. You have the intense team-focused, what I would call esports approach to the game, and then you have, on the other end, a more casual deathmatch, individualistic, just here to kind of play and enjoy the game for myself approach to the game. And I don't know if both are being served to the best of their ability with these changes. It's very difficult to say and call what the right move is. It's nice to have pick parity, but I also think it's nice when team fights form in a interesting and compelling way, whether that means Lucio's in the fights all the time or not.
An interesting thing to think about is I want to bring up a previous conversation that FREEDO and myself had off camera, and we were comparing the difference between watching pro footage and watching top-level matchmaking footage. And one of the startling differences is when you watch pro teams, what they're trying to do, like FREEDO said, is make a clear play. They are trying to make a play. And Lucio, in his previous form, is an excellent hero in that context. And when you watch top-level matchmaking, even at Masters and Grandmasters, it seems like a lot of players are waiting for other people's mistakes to then exploit, and it's a totally different way of looking at the game. Now, in that latter context, waiting for other people to make mistakes, this more individualistic Lucio seems like a better fit, but he's not as good of a fit for that previous playstyle, which is we're going to make precise plays that are done for a purpose, that don't wait for somebody else's mistakes. We're going to do this. We're going to take action A and we hope to get result A.
And really, at the end of the day, us as a community have to weigh in on what we want. And I don't necessarily think that it's okay for me to just sit here and say that what I want has to be what the game has. But I think I have a great love and appreciation for that coordinated team play. But at the same time, we don't have a team queue. We have a matchmaking queue that actually punishes team queue as much as possible, to the point where you pretty much can't physically rank up efficiently in a team, which I think is counterintuitive for other reasons, of course. And I want a team queue so that we can see more of this, because like we play on stream sometimes, and we get all sorts of different kinds of ranks to play in a 12-man lobby, and we start running these strats, and players like have never felt what it's like to say, okay, tanks in front, no one take any damage, don't poke at all until we're ready to go. Lucio, hold your speed amp until we get contact, then you go in, you pop this ult, that ult, that ult, follow up, boom, team fight lasts 5 seconds, and you either you win or lose, right? And it's like this beautiful coordinated set strat playstyle, whereas the majority of people playing Overwatch sort of are lost in this formless deathmatch style where most players play for themselves. And I think a lot of players don't know what they're missing. The grand beauty of that maximizing team play aspect of the game is sort of lost. And unfortunately, then it forces Blizzard's hand to sort of conform to that expectation. Because it isn't that Lucio wasn't good, that people weren't picking him at other ranks. It was that they didn't understand that whole other section of the game. But at the same time, it's dangerous to have a hero that's 100% pick rate. I know that. But to some degree, I think that just meant we needed another hero to compete for that slot or to counteract Lucio in some more compelling way. But alas, we have the solutions that we have now that Blizzard's putting in front of us. It's going to be interesting to see, and I think at the very least, to this competitive mentality that we typically have, this just makes Lucio a much more skillful hero. The intensity of the decisions you make, of where you go and when, has a major impact. The problem is, it's still surrounding getting that aura where it needs to be, not so much getting these cool wall ride plays as I think people want. They want that to be his value because it's fun to do, but it might get to the point where picking Lucio to play that way is sort of making your team down a man, because the value that you're getting out of that pick, if Lucio's constantly going on these weird wall rides, is so much lower. Because at least before, because his aura was so big, if Lucio's wall riding the entire time, his aura's affecting you, at least, if he's not like actively pushing his team around. But now he doesn't even have that. So it's in this really weird spot where Lucio is a very risky pick, and you're going to have to be able to command his skill set to get the value out of him.
One thing I do want to note is in the developers' notes, they themselves described the old Lucio's main power being in his passive auras. I think people have the perception that after these changes, there's a lot more value in everything else that he does, and I would argue that that's not necessarily true. I would argue, as they did, that now the auras are smaller, they can still be as powerful as they were. They even made healing better. But I perceive that as just making Lucio harder to play. It doesn't mean he's better. All his kit's value is still in the auras, it's just that they're smaller. It's just harder to use.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, because the value of speed and any healing that you ever can get out of any support is just going to be always so much better than individual things that they could do. So even with his boot being amazing now, that I think it is, there's other heroes that already have that. Like Pharah has a concussion blast. Like if you could get Lucio in position to boop a Reinhardt, you almost could probably just get a Pharah to do that, and she does damage anyway. So, and at the same degree, there's not a whole lot of value in making Lucio a more battle-oriented character, because we already have characters that do that really well. When you push a character towards a playstyle that they're not supposed to, or they can't really surpass what other characters can do, you're sort of just setting them up to fail, basically.
It's like blunting the edges of a sword. If you make his auras still the center of his kit but smaller, you're just giving him a smaller, harder to use weapon to do the same job that he did before.
But now he has more fun wall riding and booping. I will say, wall riding is so sick with this speed. It feels more Jet Set Radio than it used to be. It feels like you're in this intense whirlwind of speed and you have all this power and momentum. I think that's great. I think those are great changes. No matter what, I think that wall ride change should just go in the game no matter what. No questions asked. But it's just tricky when we're trying to say, well, let's make Lucio a frontline battle support. That's sort of a silly thing to say. That doesn't really work in the game of Overwatch, unfortunately. But we'll see if these changes go live. I'm sure a lot of discussion will be had about this, and a lot of changes to perceive to the game at all levels of play. And for that reason, I think this is one of the most interesting changes they could make. And to be honest, even though I might weigh on this is a bit misinformed of a decision, I like that Blizzard takes these chances and attempts to do the impossible and appease so many different players at one time. They come up with these really ingenious solutions to try to put characters in a place where they fit everybody's needs, and it's so hard to do, and no other company can even get close. So the mere fact that Blizzard gets close, I think, deserves a lot of respect, because other companies wouldn't be able to do this nearly as well. The good news is they want to make Lucio more fun to play. We're never going to disagree with that decision. I think every character should be more fun to play, or as fun as they can be at least. But it's also to recognize what they actually do for the game, right? It's not simple enough to say, well, holding Rhine Shield is kind of boring, so let's make him be able to throw his hammer, and it makes it an insta-kill. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you can go too far with it sometimes. But anyway, that's been it for this discussion, guys. I'm sure there's a lot of things that you guys have to say, so let us know in the comment section down below. The most impactful change ever, maybe? Question mark. If you enjoyed the discussion video, please hit the like button. It really does help us out and lets us know that you enjoy the content. Makes us feel good inside. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button, because we upload each and every day. So you're going to want to hit the bell icon so that you can join the notification squad, so that you get notified when our videos go live. We upload at all sorts of different hours of the day sometimes, especially when news drops. So you're going to want to be the first to find out. Link to the description. You can check out our Discord server where you can find friends to pair up with. Find that Lucio main of your dreams to wall ride you to victory. Also, our Twitter and our Twitch streams, where we've changed our streaming schedule to Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, with a lot more fan interaction streams that we have a lot of fun doing. That's been it for your Overwatch. It's been Eddie and Freedo. We'll see you guys next time.
Bye.